I was his wife. I feel his presence here, so I'm sure he's enjoying this.
Because he was a little show-off when he was a little kid.
He's just the quintessential kind of role model.
Never respect the line that the audience thinks that they've drawn.
Are you worried about any ramifications of dropping the F-bomb?
Look, if George did one thing for society, he broke that taboo.
For a rebel, he was a very responsible, thorough worker. Did you know George Carlin?
No. What line of work was he in?
Went down to the bottom line and saw him one night when I was a teenager.
So it's nice to have the name continue on.
You always want to take it to that level that he did.
Best comic of all time. Him and Richard Pryor right there.
Your dad is the other guy they're always.
I know, Dad.
They're always battling back and forth over who's number one.
When it comes to bullshit, religion easily has the greatest bullshit story ever told. Religion has actually convinced people that there's an invisible man living in the sky. And the invisible man has a special list of 10 things he does not want you to do. And if you do any of these 10 things, he has a special place full of fire and smoke and burning and torture and anguish where he will send you to live and suffer and burn and choke and scream and cry forever and ever till the end of time. You know who I prayed to? Joe Pesci. So I've been praying to Joe for about a year now. And I noticed something. I noticed that all the prayers I used to offer to God and all the prayers I now offer to Joe Pesci are being answered at about the same 50% rate.
Welcome to the dedication of George Carlin Way. Thank you all for being here. I am Kelly Carlin, and I'm very, very happy to be here myself. Thankfully, it looks like the rain event is staying away for now. And yes, we've all been praying to Joe Pesci all day. And if the rain had come, I would have said, well, I guess he was a little too busy being an asshole on a golf course somewhere. But clearly he got off the course in time to clear the rain for us. Very exciting. If you look this way, towards that big, beautiful cathedral over there, that block over there is the actual block that my father grew up on. The plan was to have the sign on that block. But as we know, the church is on that block, Corpus Christi, and my father and the church had a couple of philosophical differences they couldn't work out. So, of course, that was nothing new, but that's why we're up here. And actually, I'm glad we're up here because the view is quite spectacular. And Dad loved trees, and we get to be near a bunch of trees here today. So we have a few speakers. I'll be speaking at the end. We've got a few speakers coming up. Very excited you're all here. And hopefully the rain will stay away. And thank you to the fans for being here. You guys mean everything to me, so thank you. So the first person I'd like to invite to come up is City Councilman Mark Levine, who helped us jump through all of the burning, flaming hoops that it takes to get a street sign in the city of New York. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Give it up for Kelly Carlin. All right. Thank you so much. It means a great deal to us that you're here, Kelly. Where did you go?
Right here.
There you are. Thank you. Thank you. I had to say a word first about a man by the name of Kevin Bartini. Has anyone met him before? This man spent 3 years, displayed such determination, grit, heart, and if it weren't for his leadership, he wouldn't be here today. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much. For those of you who don't know, the process of getting a street renamed in New York City is a challenge of epic proportions, full of political and bureaucratic roadblocks. It's really downright Kafkaesque. So the good news, Kevin, is if your stand-up career starts to peter out, you've got a backup in political organizing. I say that with authority. I want to tell you why it's so important to me and so many of us here in the community that George be commemorated this way on 121st Street. You really can't understand the life of George Carlin unless you understand the history of Morningside Heights and what this neighborhood was in the 1940s. You really can't understand Morningside Heights and its history unless you understand George Carlin and who he was. This neighborhood was very different back in those days, though. It was a much grittier, hard-scrabble neighborhood, incredibly diverse, vibrant, and it no doubt shaped George in many, many ways. You can imagine a scrappy kid, not too big, learning to survive on the streets using his words and his wit. And there's no doubt that he absorbed the Harlem tradition of speaking truth to power. He used to call this White Harlem, by the way. And so I think he absorbed much of the best of this community. George, of course, blazed a trail really defining what artistic freedom should be in the media age, in the broadcast age. He had what can only be called a monogamous relationship with the truth. He said things that we didn't always want to hear, but we needed to hear them. And in the process, he had a bigger impact than a whole lot of politicians out there. I want to close by paying homage to a notorious routine of George in which he identified the 7 words you can't say on TV by telling you the 7 dirty words that you can't say in politics. All right? They are truth, 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 and motherfucker. Thank you very much. You've been a great crowd. Thank you. Thank you.
Dad is already happy. We got a politician to say motherfucker. Before we move on, I just want to make a shout out to some of the comics that have come here today to hang out with us. We've got my sister, Rain Pryor, back there. My brother, Rick Overton. John Fugelsang. Judah Friedlander. Jim Norton. And the most fabulous Mr. Robert Klein is back there, people. And if there's more of you, I'll catch some more names in a bit. I'd now like to bring up someone who brought to my father boundless joy, laughs, silliness, and love. He had endless nicknames for her, but I know her as Sally, Miss Sally Wade.
When they said they were naming something after George, I thought they meant a drink. So that's why I'm here. Well, I guess I'll leave now because he showed me a bar that was down the street. It was my job to text him football and basketball scores while he was in the middle of a show, not stand out in the middle of the street giving loving tributes. So, excuse me while I figure out what I'm doing here. 14 years ago, we picked up a dog in New York, a black Cocker Spaniel that was, born on George's birthday. And we named him after the Hudson River, which is, I guess, just a few blocks away. And his real name is Buster Hudson, but we call him Goofy. So, Goofy says hello. When I got the suitcase out to fly here, Goofy said, I know goddamn well what's going on. You're going to New York to see another Cocker Spaniel. And he's a smart dog. He's a lot like George, I guess being bored on the same day, but we were going to Skype, and then he decided there wasn't enough time in the world for him to teach me how before we left, so we skipped that. Anyway, recently I noticed he was sleeping beside a picture of George that I have propped in the bedroom. But then I noticed there was an air conditioning vent behind the picture, so I wasn't exactly sure why he was there, so I moved the picture to find out, and he chose the air conditioner vent. So, and George wouldn't have it any other way. Just like the street is way. Speaking of the Catholic Church, no, seriously, as you know, probably know, George went to Catholic school. But as you may not know, he kept in touch with a few of the nuns. And they would send him books of poetry, even in the last few months of his life. And mark poems for him to read. So, anyway, I'm glad to cheer everybody up. But this is such a fitting honor for him. I know that he really loves this. And it's the best tribute he could have, short of a drink, named after him, which is not too late to do still, I think. One more thing, I thought I'd read a note that from George about how he felt about New York City. He said, "Sally, every time we're in New York, it's like a picnic, the circus, a parade, 2 Super Bowls, and a World Series rolled into one." That's how much George loved being a New Yorker. So cheers to George and George's way.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you, sweetie, for being here. And we have an update on the comics. More comics have arrived, everybody. Mr. Gilbert Gottfried is here. Someone I completely forgot to say last time, Mr. Eddie Brill. And I believe Mr. Dave Attell showed up too, but I'm not quite sure. All right. Comedy is representing on the corner here, people. Speaking of comedy, there are only a few great New York-born and bred Irish comics, and unfortunately, a few of them are dead and the rest were unavailable. I kid. I'm pleased now to bring to the mic the generous, funny, and pain in the ass known as Colin Quinn.
Thanks, Kelly. Thank you. Not only is the affront to the church that they're actually putting this street up, but it got pushed through by a guy named Levine. Now listen. My Aunt Margaret, who I spoke to yesterday, who's 83, and she, prays to George Carlin every night. Whether he hears it or not is up for, obviously, debate, but she prays to him every night for me. And but when she was in Catholic school as a young girl, she wore her skirt too high one day, so the nuns, they made her put toilet paper around her legs to show how dirty she was and go to every class in the school and show everybody. And it was like a, horrifying, what's called today traumatic moment in her life. But she was one of my relatives that when Class Clown came out, I used to watch my family sitting there, all my older relatives, when we were kids, we listened to it too, but watching all these Irish, cynical, smart New York people, and they were just these beaming faces, all their faces, the red hair and freckles, chain smoking and drinking, sitting there, and it was such a healing thing. And I was listening to it the past couple of days, and it's the whole Catholic school section is 13 minutes. It's like 13 minutes that healed a giant community of Irish Catholic people because of, it was these little lines in there, like he talks about the confession thing. It's like thought, word, body, touch, dirty, like those words, and they'd all be laughing so loud because they understood what that effect just those little words had on them, And this is not to say, like Sally was just saying, George Carlin made it very clear that what he hated about the church, he loved and had nothing but affection and gratitude for all the priests, the nuns, the clergy, and how they shaped him too. So it wasn't just you can see even in that routine you can see he's saying, the Irish priest, nice guy, but he wasn't, Father Rivera. And it's like, you're watching this guy that really was judicious in his anger too. Like he really did have a positive feeling for a lot of the priests and the nuns and stuff. So it was like, it's ironic that they shaped him into the man that would not just harangue society, but harangue all of us for our ignorance, greed, and sloth. And that's when I realized, just from listening to the past few days, George Carlin was a priest. For all the damaged Catholic people, you know what I mean? And he was so Irish when he got usually commercially successful after class clown. He became this giant Hollywood star. He responded in beautiful New York Irish form by pushing away and just going deeper into himself and like not going to any parties or shaking hands and just shutting down completely and going into his own world. Like, I'm writing, I'm not going to enjoy the fruits of success or the corruption that goes with it. You know what I mean? It's like really interesting. And that's what I'm saying. When he was like a priest, he was like the opposite of the Apostle Paul. Like his conversion was away from the church and God, but it was still, his road to Damascus was that trip to Vegas that he always talked about. And his albums and specials were his epistles. His church was whatever city he was in like the Apostle Paul. And his flock was us, with maybe a special place for all the little girls that had to go into classrooms with toilet paper wrapped around their legs. Thank you, guys.
There is someone actually on Twitter that has the Twitter handle Church of Carlin already, so it's definitely happening. So next up is really the man who made all of this happen. We would not be standing here today if it wasn't for this man. It all started with Kevin having an irritation. No, not that kind. He was really irritated that this neighborhood had not recognized one of its greatest achievements, the making of a legendary comedian. And this irritation grew so big that he began to irritate everyone around him until they all said to him, well, go out and do something about it. And he actually did. So this is actually a great moment of civic action that is happening here, because it's a man with a vision and went out and did something. So please give Kevin Bartini a warm welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much, Kelly. I can't begin to tell you all what a completely surreal experience this is. This all began as an offhanded comment based on a fleeting idea. What followed was a 3-year odyssey, a political campaign, a public battle with the Catholic Church, and now this amazing crowd of comedy fans gathered together. Who knew that so much could come from merely smoking a joint with a friend and talking about comedy? To say that this experience has changed my life is an understatement. I would like to begin by saying publicly that there was not a second of this undertaking that I did not relish, and being the guy to lead this charge was a privilege and an honor. To me, the sign is not only a tribute to George Carlin, this sign is also a long overdue recognition by the city of New York to the contributions and the importance of the comedy community as a whole. With dozens of comedy clubs, scores of bars and back rooms providing comedy on a nightly basis, thousands of comics have worked here, grown here, and helped to establish New York City as the undisputed greatest comedy city in the world. And it is high time that the joy that we bring, the contributions we make, the jobs and the taxes which we generate are finally acknowledged and celebrated. I am a proud member of this comedy community, and I am proud to be one of the countless journeymen who walk in the immense shadow cast by George Carlin. I discovered George Carlin at the age of 10. I was already a huge fan of stand-up, and I knew that it's what I wanted to do with my life. My uncle turned me on to George by slipping me his copies of Class Clown and Occupation Fool, warning me in a hushed tone, "Don't tell your parents I gave you this." Those 2 albums blew open the doors of perception in my mind and forever changed who I was and what I thought. You see, at the time, I was a closeted atheist, stuck in Catholic school. I doubted what I was being taught, but I dared not speak out. And hearing this man talk about once being the same kid, going through the same things, was a revelation. To hear him put into words the thought that I dared not speak, and then to hear hundreds of people laugh, applaud, and agree, it made me feel as though the world was a little less lonely. I know that's corny. Sorry. It's true. It's totally true. I will tell you that gesture from my uncle to loan me those albums meant more to me than he will ever know. I've tried to carry that on by turning my own nephew on to George Carlin, but unfortunately I have been far less successful. Maybe it's because he doesn't relate to the material. Maybe it's because he has a different sense of humor than me. Maybe it's because he's 2 years old. I'm gonna keep trying though, I promise. When I became a comedian, I gained an entire new appreciation for George Carlin. The man showed that it was possible to produce quantity without sacrificing quality. Reverence for nothing, nothing is sacred, nothing is beyond reproach. He made you laugh and subversively altered the way you saw the world. The genius of George Carlin is that he was able to get a much-needed message to an otherwise, oftentimes apathetic populace without us realizing that our opinions were even being shaped and changed. You know, I grew up, like so many in the last century, when George Carlin was there for all of us, constantly as a source of laughter and as a voice of reason. And then until all of a sudden he was gone, and then I think we all kind of collectively realized, boy, there's a guy we're really gonna miss. And although I don't believe that he's looking down on us, for the sake of symbolism and theatrics, I'd like to look to the sky over Morningside Heights and think of it as a place, if there was anywhere where his spirit would linger, it would be right here. And I'd just like to say thank you, sir. Thank you for the inspiration to write more and to think deeper. Thank you for being a constant source of laughter and comfort. Thank you for sharing your gift with the rest of us. The human race is better because of it. You have served us all well, and this street sign is a token of our gratitude. From the entire community of people who share a love for you, cheers to you, George Carlin. If you would permit me a moment just to thank a few people, I would appreciate it. First, I want to thank the people who made this campaign so much fun for me. Thank you, Corpus Christi. Thank you, Corpus Christi, for at one point in time thinking outside the box and creating a revolutionary educational environment free of report cards and grades, where a young George Carlin was taught to, in his own words, study and excel simply for the joy of discovery. Thank you for creating a garden in which one of the greatest minds of a generation would grow and flourish. It saddens me that Corpus Christi chooses not to celebrate their most prized alumni, that they hope to hide from their current students a man for whom they could learn so much, a man whose curiosity, lifelong quest for knowledge, and unparalleled work ethic are all values that should be ingrained on every child. They claim that their opposition was to protect students from being exposed to dirty words. Just my luck. The one time in 2,000 years that the Catholic Church decides to protect children has to be on my watch. You see, it's not the dirty words that they are really afraid of, it's the thoughts. It's George's themes that he so often utilized, like questioning authority, taking nothing at face value, questioning everything. And when you are the church, those messages can be bad for business. So I don't resent them for opposing us. They really did make this whole process a hell of a lot more fun. And a bang-up job they did. Once construction is over, that sign will end up being hung about 75 feet to the right of where we wanted it. So the children are safe. There's no way they'll be able to see that sign from all the way across the street, unless they squint. Not only will the kids see it, but they will know that it's across the street because their principal, their priest, doesn't want them to see it. That plan won't backfire, will it? If there's one thing that I know about kids, that they're never attracted to things simply because the powers that be forbid it. It's like that movie Footloose, where Kevin Bacon and those kids are told by John Lithgow not to dance, so they sit on their hands respectfully for the rest of the film. For the next 50 Halloweens, this neighborhood is going to be littered with kids dressed up as Al Sleek, the hippy-dippy weatherman. This campaign was not a solo effort by any means, and there really are some people who I would like to take a moment to recognize for their efforts and their time. First and foremost, I would like to thank my two closest confidants and co-conspirators, my wife Jessica and my buddy Adam Lash. Thank you. They both stood next to me collecting signatures 3 years ago, and they were the two people sitting next to me when the city council unanimously voted in our favor. Through the entire process, you both coolly offered advice and companionship. I appreciate your efforts. I love you both, and I share this day with you. To the volunteers who have stepped in at various points in the campaign, the comics who performed to support our cause, to everyone who signed the petition, shared it, retweeted, told a friend, garnered us even additional signature, thank you. You helped us drive up the score to an almost unsportsmanlike 9,000 to 80. Pretty good. I'd like to thank Kelly and Patrick Carlin. Thank you for allowing me to take this on. I'd like to say I'm grateful for having gotten to meet each of you during this process, but I'm still yet to meet Patrick, and I'm looking forward to that. But, for both of you guys, just enjoy this day and bask in every ounce of love that's coming your way. You deserve it. And lastly, a thank you to Joe Trentacosta. Joe is a publicist who came on and offered his support from the moment that I first found myself in the press's focus. He was my consigliere, my counsel, and my secret weapon throughout this entire campaign. Joe Trentacosta, you are a good man, and I am glad to have made a friend in you. So this is it for me. It's the end of the road. Some people have asked me what I plan to do next, and I can't say for sure. In the meantime, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get up on stage, and I'm going to try out a new bit, because I think that's what George would have wanted. Thank you all.
Well done, Kevin. I think you got 3 applause breaks on that. Just want to shout out to some of my sister comedians who are here. Liz Winstead is here, and Miss Katie Goodman's here also in the crowd. But now I want to introduce my father's older brother, the man who terrorized these streets for more than 50 decades, my uncle Patrick Carlin.
Hey, I had nothing to do with this, man. It's so beautiful. This is remote control. This is my friend Kevin, who I finally got to meet and thank, and every one of the people you thanked, I'm thanking too. And Kelly, wonderful. I'm looking up here and I'm thinking of George and yesteryear and about the church and all. Let me tell you something. When you get to be an old dude, you become philosophical. Yeah, man. And I looked at that when I first seen it happening, and I said, well, now, wait a minute. What would Jesus do? Yeah. Render the, Caesar gets one side of the coin and the church gets the other. I don't know how they do that. But anyway, I said the church was here first. Therefore, they're okay. 2, a blessing from my brother, and I know he rooted for this. When my mother moved here, she had delusions of grandeur, This is a girl who gave a box of horse shit to a girl who didn't invite her to a birthday party. Yeah. So she wanted to raise 2 perfect boys, Got kicked out of goddamn Catholic school for too much bracelets and shit. But she wants us to be cool. So now it comes time here that they're going to put George's name on Broadway. Well, wait a minute. That's what she wanted. We moved to, lovely was a big word with her. We moved to this lovely neighborhood, and you don't hang with Duane, who does his homework. You go down to Amsterdam Avenue, and you seek out the Scruff, the Hagans and the Harnbys. Why can't you emulate these other... And that's the jive that we had to listen to. So Amsterdam Avenue was heaven, man. That's where we shot crap. George used to smoke dope right over there. And, yeah, man, this was a cool neighborhood, man. And everybody loved one another. We didn't care if you spoke Spanish or whatever you were doing. As long as you were cool, you were cool. And he grew up here, and he loved it. And it's right that he get his name up here in the neighborhood, because whenever the dude would come back to New York, or even close to New York, he'd wind up in New York. And he'd go cruising. We'd go through the financial district when nobody's there. You got to do that, man. Yeah. You get Heaney and Freely and Doc and George, and they're passing a joint around and cruising through the financial district. It's a wonderful thing. It's a lot of fun. So here is George with his name going on Amsterdam Avenue, which is very fitting. And the church had a good workout of umbrage, you know, to let us know they're still breathing. I gotta tell you, just a personal thing, man. I don't go with atheists any more than I go with biblical Christians. It's all jive. If you're an atheist, you're telling me after you croak, then you know for a goddamn fact there ain't no God. Bullshit. You haven't been there, so forget that. That's as bad as the Christian thing. So I think, and I wrote a book. I'm not plugging this book. Do not go and buy the son of a bitch. Do not buy this son of a bitch. But I named it Quien fucking Sabe. Because when you ask me what happens next, I'll tell you, I ain't got no idea. I know George is happy with the way things are unrolling. And I'm his brother, so I can say it, man. I think of him in with Mark Twain and Will Rogers. Sorry, that's it. That's where it is, man. And they were playing, oh, the days of the Kerry dancers when we moved here. So he's happy, and I'm happy. And if I'm happy, that's what counts.
I just want to give a shout out to one last person who's not going to speak, but who's here today. My dad's good friend and manager for over 30 years, Jerry Hamza's here. And he helped my dad survive and create the amazing career that he had the last 35 years. And I just saw Ted Alexander through the peeking there. Hey, Ted. All right, so I just want to say a few words here before we end. So it wasn't always easy being the daughter of a famous funny man, with his constant scribbling of words on paper, packing to get on another airplane, and dreams of being Danny Kaye someday. He was committed to our family and loved us dearly, but he was driven by his craft and his insatiable need to keep conquering uncharted comedy territory every day. But it wasn't always hard being a daughter of a famous funny man either. He'd make me pancakes for dinner, taught me how to ride my bike, and when I was a teenager, he always split ounces of weed with me. He gave me the Carlin DNA of the gift of the gab, a need to speak my mind out loud to the world, and a genuine adoration of fart jokes. These last 6 years since his death, I found that it's not always easy being the daughter taking care of a legacy of a famous funny man. I've worried about how his memory is living on in the zeitgeist, while the neocon organizations appropriate, twist, and mangle his words to serve their own agenda, while climate change deniers completely misinterpret his piece, "The Planet is Fine," to justify their anti-science stances. And soccer moms blindlessly forward the endless Facebook memes of quotes that sound nothing like my dad. My favorite is, "Life is not measured by the breaths you take, but by the moments that take your breath away." Really? That doesn't sound anything like George Carlin. Wishful thinking, people. But these last 6 years, I've mostly found that it's not been hard being the daughter taking care of the legacy of a famous man. First of all, he left us all a rich and vast body of his work in so many media. There are teenagers across the world making some serious dough on his YouTube videos, but they're also learning who George Carlin is. Then there are the family of comics and comedians and other people of questionable reputation that have embraced me, taken me in, and made me part of their family. I can't tell you how much that has meant to me. But lastly, there are you, the fans. His rabid, crazy, loud, at times a bit too crazy, but always faithful fans. I love you dearly. Your love and your light has kept me sane, keeps my father's memory alive. Thank you so much. And we are now going to pull the little thingy off the sign.
Stretch it out. Wow. All these cameras. Stretch it. Pull horizontal, not vertical. Yeah. Woo!